Well, I'm in Dave Armstrong's amazing studio. This is how you do podcasting. I've got this rogue setup where I've just got these DJI mics. I clip them on, travel around. And actually I started my second podcast that I had done. I saw Mike Wilkerson on another podcast and went, God, he'd be cool to talk to, but he's American, lives in Spain. And I thought, what are the chances that I'm actually going to be able to speak to him? So I looked him up on Instagram and he was going to be at Living Free Festival in 3 weeks from that moment. And I was like, oh, here we go. So I took off up there and hung out for the 3 days and, just had my little magnetic, what do you call them, tripods with my iPhones on it and my DJI mics. And so I've rocked up today and I'm like, yeah, this is a little more like it.
Yeah, I've got the same thing. They're so good though.
Yeah, they are.
So you can't even really tell. And I think, it's great to have a podcasting room and that sort of thing, but the little mics and everything work just as well.
Yeah, they do.
So
they do. It's something that I'd like, because I like the idea of moving around. Like my my podcast is called Frequenaut.
Yeah.
So this episode is going to be a Living Free. Well, you've not done a Living Free podcast before. We're going to call it Living Free Pod times Frequenaut, and we're just going to go back and forth. Dave and I got introduced. I didn't even meet you at the actual festival. We got introduced by a mutual friend, Sky, and I was coming down to Melbourne for a friend's wedding and thought, let's link up. And I'm like, what do you want to talk about? And I'm like, well, we could talk about a million different things. So we're just going to flow and see where it sort of takes us.
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, for those from Living Free who don't know much about yourself, do you want to just touch on your background briefly, and maybe even also how you came to get to the Living Free Festival, apart from Mike, but that's actually a journey, right? That's a journey from, your awakening in some capacity to a different world to end up there, because the average person doesn't turn up to the Living Free Festival without that some sort of story or journey behind it.
Yeah, so my life could sort of be summarized in a two-pronged pursuit. One being, I guess, artistry, which led me into the acting world. My mum's an actor. My natural creativity plus exposure led me to being like, I can do that. And so I'll pursue that. Simultaneously, my mum and my dad had me very young. And so they split up, but they're both quite tuned into the spiritual realm, or are in resonance with, I guess, light. There's a large guiding force, even though they've got their own, subjective physical lives that they pursue, same as myself. There's this common through line with both of them that has very much guided me to pursue this spiritual journey, for a lack of a better term. But I remember from the earliest age, I would, stories of, mum would say, as soon as you were one or something, you'd crawl up to people and women who were in need, you'd know who was in need, touch their feet and stare at them and do this kind of like, I guess, healing sort of something on them. And so there was that seed that was always there. And then when I was 4, my neighbours were Hare Krishnas, and I remember having this spark of like, I want to go. And so I asked mum if I could go with them. And so they took me, and I remember getting to the temple and physically looking for something. I'm looking for something. What is it? Obviously I didn't find it because it's not a physical thing. And then my dad, he moved up to Queensland when I was maybe 9 months old. By the time I was 3, he'd had a really big accident. He'd fallen out of a 3-story building, and as a result of that went into a coma and had an out-of-body experience for 18 days, which he reports, witnessing heaven, witnessing these higher realms, being thrown into hell, what he would describe as hell, and not ever told whether he was going to come out, shown his funeral. If he were to continue being the way he was and dying the way that he was now, how many people would be there, what people's opinions would be of him, what mark he would have left on the world if he were to continue being who he is. And then he was let out. The other thing was he was floating above the hospital and witnessing all these different layers of reality, a whole vibrational spectrum of what's taking place or what we're actually in. And so he came out of that clearly a changed person. You can't not change after an event like that. Well, then
what a
again,
gift though.
Oh yeah.
Like,
I mean,
to have that experience and to be able to recalibrate your life based on that experience and have a second chance. Like, that's such an amazing gift.
Mm-hmm. And so within that experience, while he was in there, he was introduced to a being which led him to a teacher, a hermetics teacher on the outside world, on the Gold Coast.
Yeah.
And so then by the time I was about 6, Dad would read me the Initiation into Hermetics book, Franz Barden's Initiation into Hermetics, and tell me about what was possible based on his own experience plus what this teacher was teaching,
Yeah.
And there was something that sort of sparked in me, and I knew on some level that I had to find this person. And then by the time, let's say, how long would have passed? 15 years passes, and I have been pursuing this acting career, and I end up on Neighbours, end up with a bit of disposable income. And I go, I'm going to try and find Mark. So I Google him. He's in Chiang Mai. I go and train with him for a week. And then I do that again twice, 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks over the next sort of like year in my production breaks. And then I end up training with him full time in 2022 for 9 months straight, which I kind of always knew that I was going to. Actually, when I met my wife.
Was this in Chiang Mai?
Chiang Mai. Sorry, it was Mexico and then Chiang Mai as well. Yeah. So we bounced around over the course of 9 months. This is a little unsuccinct. I'm trying to find it as I'm going. Apologies. But when I met my now wife, without really knowing if this was ever going to happen, I said to her, just so you know, I'm probably going to leave for about a year, and I've got to do this thing. This is what I want to do before I have children. And then, we do a bunch of things in our life. We live in the States, we come back, COVID drags us back to Australia because we're thinking it's this big bad wolf and we want to have healthcare and all this sort of stuff, right? And then a year after that, I book home and away. I'm there for 7 months before they say, if you want to come back next year, you've got to be double vaccinated for COVID. I said no. Then I'm back in the dark again. And then this opportunity to go and train with this teacher, my teacher, Mark Rasmus, presents itself, in sort of like one of the darker points, like, oh shit, I don't know where life goes here. We're set to get married in 2 months' time. Does that summarize? Does that give enough?
Yeah, which is, I guess, so this has been a part of your journey for a long time, underlying, and then you had this other career, and those two things collided to a point where you couldn't, knowing, more about vaccines and everything, you couldn't take that step, and you had to make a decision to.
Yeah. Well, as I said to you earlier, my dad has had so many runs on the board that had led me to what I consider to be a really poignant, important chapter of my life, that when he came to me in the middle of this COVID malarkey and goes, do not take the vaccines. He'd been looking into, governmental control, all of the, I guess, the conspiracy theory side of things for 15 years prior to this taking place. And I'd always listen with an open heart and open mind and go, well, I don't actually who am I to say that's not true? That's not true. That's not true. You listen and you go, wow, imagine what if it is true? That's amazing. You don't have to believe it straight off. But when he came to me and goes, do not take it, I knew I couldn't, even though I'd just gotten my career back. I'm just starting to get runs on the board again. I just went, oh, fuck, okay, no, I can't do it. I can't do it, much to the dismay of many people.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty crazy journey. And then obviously ending up at the festival, you ended up meeting quite a few of the people that we brought out, and you've interviewed and everything as well. I saw that you did an interview with Dr. Simon Floriani.
Yeah.
Absolute champion. I actually went to watch part of their workshop. He had a guy out from the States called Brett, who's like a healer slash shaman type guy, chiropractic sort of training. And they were training up all these other chiropractors. And I got such a sense of hope in this healing world because, I had a sports medicine practice. So I had more of a traditional sort of understanding of how to train the body and all of these things. And then what I've realized is that the universities have failed so terribly at passing on this information, especially in things like chiropractic. So to see these guys actually teaching healing, like true healing, and, that there's not this one textbook answer on how to do this, and it's not about manipulating this way. And so just watching them actually pass on that information gave me hope that we're not going to lose all of these ancient knowledge of healing and everything else. So, yeah, it was awesome to see. But Simon's a champion. He'll be back this year.
Oh, is he coming back?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. He's been great. He helped when I went and did the interview with him. I went to his office in South Melbourne, and I went with my mum, my wife, and my daughter. And my wife has had 5 vertebrae fused because she had scoliosis down lower, and so she was advised that in order to not make it worse during pregnancy, it should be fused so that, the relaxin and stuff doesn't, if she's already a bendy girl, as they call them, then it may get worse. And the amount that it was, that the degree of the curve or the cob angle was already starting to impact organs and stuff. So it felt like the only real option. But Simon did an adjustment on Nat, my mum, and my daughter Aurelia when she was maybe like 7 or 8 months old.
Yeah.
And he keeps in touch with us on a WhatsApp, like continuously. Like he's such a busy dude, yet has time to still reach out and be like, how's everyone going? Checking in, da 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 da. Yeah. I love him. Yeah. Really great dude. And the adjustment he did on me, I was like, oh my God, what's going on? Like, why? What's this thing that was blocked up and bound up? And we started the interview, and I was kind of just, all this emotion was trying to, find its way out. It was a really cool experience. And the perspective on chiropractic as well, my perspective changed dramatically because I, without ever looking at it, on the periphery had heard, it's just quackery. It's, you get, your back adjusted and then you leave, feel good for 15 minutes, come back in a week type of thing. And the more I've started to look into it, the more I go, wow, that totally aligns with a lot of the stuff that I learned when I was training with my teacher. You just go, it's this holistic, for a lack of a better word, that's not over smacked around.
Yeah.
The health space is we spoke about earlier, we've got this conditioned mind that the rest of society that we're connected to, and we're driven by that largely. And then you're met with something that you feel is true or closer to what you would consider to be true. And then you got this internal battle of almost this internal chaos that happens where you're almost gaslighting yourself,
Yeah.
And so to consolidate all of that, it's a real process.
Yeah. I mean, as far as having a sports medicine company, having a sports performance company, there, you work with the surgeons, you've got your physios. There's like a whole, system in which you go into for recovery of that. And yet we had a podcast the other day with Daniel Reuters online.
Oh, did you really? Oh,
and Daniel comes on for a regular series on Living Free. And the whole podcast, what we're talking about was effectively how much is the belief the healer? So the belief in whatever it is. And we were talking about some of the studies. There was a study of 50 people who had knee operations. So they all needed this operation. 25 of them had the actual operation. 25 of them they cut and made it look like that they had the operation but didn't. And all of them reported and thought that they had recovered. And so the power of this belief, and we're talking about like how much does belief impact the actual thing, and do we need anything but that belief? And so, that whole discussion, which throws everything out the window of what we're told, in that sports performance arena and everything else. So, both of us are working on something. We've both got our own health challenges, and we're both now working on every time you've got that feeling of thinking the body, it's already happened. So you just believe that it's already happened in this belief that okay, I'm already healed. Thank you. Rather than worrying about it or anything else, which creates something else. And this is, I guess, sort of some of the things we've talked about, off camera as well was, are some of these answers, like the further you go into it, the more you learn, the less you actually know. And then how do you actually present that to somebody? How do you tell them that just believe that you're healed and you'll heal? Or how do you tell them that, for me, the experience of COVID, I didn't wear a mask. I walked around, did all of that. And it was constant training for me because I had young kids that I would have on my hands. I would go to a shopping center. I would be walking past a police officer and I would just smile. And I trained myself to just have this belief that like I'm okay. And I didn't attract any of that stuff. But if I went in with that fear, that I would have attracted that attention and I would have had a different scenario come about. And you talk about the same sort of thing as you go past a dog and the dog will snarl at one person and then the next person it can pat. So what is it that's being picked up that we can't see? And this is the difficult thing with all of this area is a lot of what we're talking about, a lot of what we're learning is that we can't necessarily see it or put it into a textbook book and teach it in the same way. It's like a journey. And as you go on that journey, you start to discover there's more to all of these things than what we can even put into words. Mm-hmm. And so what is that? Mm-hmm. Is it God? Is it spiritual? Is it whatever? So
it's a really interesting aspect of where we're at, I think, in our collective development and awareness of consciousness in the spectrum of reality that we're in. Because when you look at, quote unquote spiritual evolution, it's never an additional thing. It's not adding anything. It's always subtracting. And what are we actually subtracting? What's the perception of subtraction? It's the moving away from the aspect of our system that needs to know what's taking place. So it's always a letting go of a denser form of reality in order to get to a more refined form of reality, which ironically, it feels like you're letting go and there's less and less and less, but there's more and more and more. Mm. And what you're describing there in terms of, I guess the science or the miracle of belief and just having to believe is that it's like we get stuck. And I'm speaking out of turn because I don't have all the answers by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not trying to purport that's the thing. I'm always trying to work this thing out myself. In that meditation space. But it's we're stuck. we're held. Our belief and our mental state is held together by this a collective like grip on what we think is true. And like I was talking about with the conditioned mind versus what you're actually seeing, it's like this gravitational force pulling you back this way. And see, this is the thing. Every time I go to dive into it, particularly I've got a mate who travels around in a van and someone I trained with, and we dive into these sorts of topics and we end up at, I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Oh, I don't know.
So then I think part of that journey is accepting that we don't know and then enjoying or admiring the wonder of the world. Like just going, how cool is this? Mm-hmm. How amazing is this? Like, to me, and I'll share a little bit about my background soon, but I'd achieved a lot at a young age. And, and for me, the world became a little bit boring. It was like, if I try, I can achieve this. And it sounds a bit cocky and everything else, but that's what my reality was. And then going on this journey, I've discovered that the world is so much deeper and more exciting. And, I just thought it was very structured. And it was like, if you do this, you can get this outcome. Mm. But then now going on this alternative journey, it's been completely different. And the depths and the knowledge and the unknowing is exciting to me. I've had an adventure company for most of my life. And to me, we're now in the biggest adventure ever. And it's exciting. And I don't even have to, go to these extreme places to have this experience. It's, enjoying that. And I think that that's a big shift. Like, we'll probably talk about some of the Epstein stuff and things like that as well. But it's, enjoying that journey of what we're on and changing our perspective is so important to shift from that fearful state, from that state of, having to know everything mm-hmm. or believing that we know everything. Mm-hmm. As we shift through that and then we just start to enjoy it, everything else shifts internally. And then externally, your life starts to change in a similar manner. And you start to actually attract more people that are on that frequency as well. Mm-hmm. But, it's been a really big experience. My experience started probably when I was, probably about 10 years ago. So I had this adventure company where I started off scuba diving and sailing a yacht to Antarctica. I was 23. I was bored in a dive shop. I was a dive instructor and I was like, what could I do? What else can I do? There's got to be more to this stuff.
Everything's so easy.
Yeah. And it was like, what's the most extreme scuba diving I can do? And then that was basically what came up. So an opportunity came where I could hire a yacht and I could sell to some other people to come and join me so that they could pay for my trip as well. Yeah. And take off down there. So we sailed a yacht. It was equivalent to doing the Sydney to Hobart yacht race on the way down. So, and then we're down there for a month scuba diving and then the same on the way back. And I actually, because I put so much effort in, I thought I was going to get depressed. And I thought, like, what now? What's next? And as I came back, we were sort of sailing back, I'm starting to get more and more excited as we're coming towards land. And I realized that I could achieve anything. And so this was really important for me in an early age to have this inner belief that I could achieve anything. So, I got picked up by an adventure company and we started doing Kokodas and, all different trips around. And those guys had an army background. So they were ex-SAS and ex-commandos who were sort of running it. And so I got to be a part of some of their big adventures and do that sort of thing. And then I wanted to do my own adventure company. So I came down to Melbourne, wanted to set up an adventure company down here. And then I wanted a place to train my clients. And as I was saying, things come easy. I'm doing a run past Amy Park Stadium, which is being built. It was called Melbourne Rectangular Stadium. At that stage, they didn't have naming rights. And I was like, I bet you they haven't thought of who's going to run. There's got to be a big gym here that's going to be built for all the athletes. And sure enough, I made some phone calls, and before I knew it, I was in a meeting with the 3 CO clubs, which was Melbourne Storm, Melbourne Victory, and Melbourne Football Club. And I presented to them that I could use the facility to train my clients outside of their hours, and I could also manage it for them during the day, because how are you going to not argue who's going to pick up what dumbbell at what stage, in the pools and all of that. So we ended up taking that over, and because I had this facility, I might as well set up a sports medicine company and a sports performance company, and we spread in Melbourne and Sydney and all the rest of it. So that was about a decade of my time.
What year was that?
When was it? I'm terrible with years.
How old were you?
So I would have been 29, 28, somewhere in that range. Yeah, maybe even a bit earlier, 27. And I was still running adventures at this time as well. So we took adventures across, like we took Vietnam veterans back to Vietnam, where I was doing trips to Everest Base Camp and beyond, some of those mountains, obviously Kokoda, and then I was doing mental toughness and resilience camps with, all the athletes that we had coming through. And so we had these 2 companies, everything's going pretty well. I'm thinking that the world is all pretty easy. I'm living, renting a nice house in Canterbury, which you'd know is a nice sort of suburb. And I started to have these questions. One was around vaccines, which is funny because your life changed with that as well. Simon, who I ended up meeting, the chiropractor, was around the same thing. He'd spoken out about vaccines, and that's how I got to meet him. But I had a prayer. For the first time, I basically sat in the middle of this oval, this cricket pitch, and I said, God, I'm starting to see what some of this craziness in the world, including the child trafficking. I've obviously got this background. I'm sure, God, if you are who you say you are, you probably already know what I do, And so I'm having this conversation. Now, I wanted to sit in the middle of this cricket pitch because I didn't want anyone to hear this prayer, because I was like embarrassed by even the thought of saying this out loud. So it was me and my dog sitting in this thing. And I was like, yeah, so I'll go to places that others won't go, and I've got these skills. And thought nothing of it. And then within a few months, there was about $2 million of contracts we had government contracts that were taken away, like not directly from us, but the whole industry. In these education stuff that we're doing, and we were in a position we couldn't go any further, so we kept going for as long as we could, running these multiple facilities throughout Melbourne, Sydney, and then we had to shut that down, and that was a big shift. And so my journey then sort of went off, and I was like, okay, well, clearly I'm meant to be doing something different, and taking on that. I saw something on Facebook where they effectively put up this underground bunker. And it was just this random guy. He went viral. His name was Lewis Arthur. He went viral. He showed this underground bunker in Tucson, Arizona, and said, if anyone can come and help us do a search and rescue for these kids, can you come and come across? And obviously I had experience in navigation and adventure and doing all of this stuff. And I said to my mate, Nick, I said, how good would it be if we could go on this trip? But, I was at the stage of shutting these companies down, and I didn't have any money. And I said, unfortunately, we don't have the money to go across. So the next day he rings me and he goes, Dave, there's $11,500 in my account that I can't account for. And I think, God's telling us we've got to go. So within a week, I was on my way over there, and we went across. There was a guy called Craig Sawyer, and this is going a bit deeper into this stuff as well, but we'll touch on this and then explain sort of the journey. But a guy called Craig Sawyer, he had a group called Vets for Child Rescue. He went out and he showed this site as well. He said, yes, it's the kids get trafficked through here across the border. Here's the rape trees. Here's the, shoes, showed the whole thing. And he had quite a big name in the child rescue sort of scene. And then, just before we're about to get on the plane, he reversed his position. He said, no, it's a homeless camp. I was mistaken. I got lied to, nothing to see here, and tried to shut it down. And so we're like, I ring this guy called Lewis Arthur.
This is the guy who put the Facebook post up?
So the guy, Lewis Arthur, was this other group. And so I rang this Lewis Arthur guy and I said, mate, this Craig Sawyer guy who, he's got a pretty big reputation, has just said there's nothing to see here. I don't want to get on a plane, come all that way and, what's going on. And he just goes, welcome to the media, brother. Come and see for yourself. And I was like, okay. So we went across and sure enough, what we saw was major trafficking through this region. Obviously, this guy called Craig Sawyer had flipped and was paid off in some capacity, which we later confirmed was true, that he was paid off. And that's what a lot of these child rescue groups are. I don't get behind, I don't know of any that are good. And I've had a lot of victims come forward after this. I'll share some of the journey of those people that came forward where I worked with them. But most of the time, what they are there to do is to effectively stop the elite stuff getting out. So they might catch a couple of low-level pedo sort of stuff, but if there's anything big like what we stumbled across, they cover it up, which is what this Craig Sawyer did. It seems to be that a lot of these groups do that because they're only ever chasing the low-level stuff. And as we're aware in the Epstein stuff, there's another whole level to what's going on from government, etc. So anyway, I got involved in this group. We were over there for a couple of weeks and then we came back to Australia and I continued to help them. And then we started to plan how we could do more of these things in rescuing and exposing stuff over here. So we set up a group called Project Millstone. We had a lady called Fiona Barnett, who's very well known in the effectively government programs of being abused, satanic ritual abuse types survivor. She's written a book. She's got some documentaries and that sort of thing. We became really close friends. And she told me in depth of how these things work, through especially at the elite level and the government stuff. Through her, there was a guy called Isaac Cappy who was, he'd been in the movie Thor, he'd been in the movie Terminator or one of the Terminator ones as a low-level actor. And he was friends with Seth Green, Marilyn Manson, a bunch of these sorts of people.
Who would have ever thought that he was dark?
Yeah, nothing to see there. But, he came out around this same sort of time and explained what he'd seen in Hollywood. And so he became quite viral talking out about Spielberg, about Tom Hanks, about these other ones. And then he was obviously in danger for what was going on. So he decided to come out to Australia to visit Fiona and to visit myself. And so he stayed in my house in Melbourne for about a week and then gave a talk at my mate's gym. And then when he went back, he was suicided/killed, So the official part is suicide, but he apparently threw himself off a bridge into traffic. Now, he always claimed he wasn't suicidal. And I was texting with him the day before. And so anyway, my journey in this whole thing became, I was talking to Fiona for probably a couple of years on this really dark stuff. We had a lot of people coming forward with things that had happened to them and organizations and people that they knew who were involved in this stuff. Isaac came out, he was killed. And so everything, once Isaac sort of was killed, Fiona went into hiding and everything stopped. So from this thing of God opening up this door, which is, $11,500 coming into this account, and clearly this is what I'm meant to be doing, through to this part where it just stopped and there was nothing there. And so for me, I had to then go through another journey. But because we had a couple of young kids at the time, the journey for me was also really dark and hard on my wife going through that. So I was changing my kid's nappy and I'm thinking about these stories or these things that I'd been told. And it was dark. It was the darkest time I've had, trying to work out what this world was, and no one really knew about this stuff then. Now it's a bit more known, but no one knew about it, and also no one wanted to listen. And it was just this switching off, like if you mention this stuff, that's ridiculous. That there's no way this stuff happens. And, close friends that I had relationships with that knew everything I'd done and achieved in my life. Like I don't talk about, I don't talk up stuff that's not true. Mm-hmm. I would say this stuff and they would just close down. And
what do you attribute that to? Sorry to cut you off.
Well, no, like this was part of the journey. And this is, I think, really what we're going to get to on this is I know that I didn't have fear because I'd put myself in these situations, right? I'd, go across, we're going up against the cartels. There was people shot over there. It's real stuff. And people would say maybe it's a conspiracy. Well, I went to go back to the United States and they put a hold on my visa so I couldn't get in due to the work that I'd done there. So, there's extra evidence. And then the other person I went with also had the same thing. So we were unable to travel back. I haven't tried again since. But I was actually at the airport trying to get in, and the Department of Homeland Security had put a hold on my passport.
Were you at an Australian airport or the American airport?
The Australian one.
Oh, thank God.
I'm sitting in Melbourne trying to get in, and they just said, no, they've cancelled your visa. So we later found out that they classed us as radicals because we were trying to save children. So
you mentioned that you know who you pissed off as well. Can you say who that was? Yeah.
So the where the underground bunker was, it was on some land owned by a company called Cemex, which is the largest cement company in the world. Their sister company also has underground storage. So if you put those two things together, mm-hmm. one can make cement, one can do underground storage, and they happen to be next to each other, and they happen to be all the way along the US-Mexico border. So put that together. You tend to sort of put a picture there of something that's deeper that would maybe accidentally discovered. They also paid $100 million, if you look up on their records, $100 million to the Clinton Foundation, which those who go a bit deeper on the Clinton Foundation know that, that's how they move money around and that sort of thing. So, it gets pretty deep at all of those levels, and clearly someone had enough sway to be able to put a hold on little old Dave's passport and Nick's passport so that we couldn't go back and help any further. And we weren't actually going back to help. I was going across there for a conference. So it was a completely unrelated thing, but that had held us back from going or entering into the States. So would clearly upset someone at a decent enough level. But yeah, coming back to the reason that I think that people wouldn't want to listen was I came back with probably a fearful state of, okay, the world needs to know about what's going on, and they need to be aware that this stuff is real. And, if we don't wake these people up as to what's going on, what life of my kids got growing up. And so there was a level of fear being put out, even though it wasn't a direct fear of my own life, because I was willing to put myself in these situations. And subsequently on my journey, I've now learned that wasn't a good thing, and so when I started then flipping and working on like living free and creating solutions and doing all of these things, people then wanted to know about those stories. So my frequency or what I was putting out changed. And so, and this is a big thing, that I talk about a lot is, what are we sharing and what are we doing? Is it creating solutions or is it making the situation worse? So when people are sharing this stuff on Facebook, when they're doing this, are they actually doing anything that's helping, or are they feeding the very energy? And I know I was feeding that energy now, subsequently. And this is why I think we had this chat previously, was that we need to be careful about these topics because we don't want to feed the very thing, and maybe you want to talk about that a little bit, because that's was really important for you if we're going to talk about this, is to how we frame it without creating the same fear that we're trying to avoid?
Yeah. So there's this saying, and I didn't even look it up since our last conversation. And I told you over the phone that I was going to butcher it. Watch me butcher it again.
Yeah.
And it's somewhere along the lines of, if you're in a dark room, don't try and scoop out the darkness, open the blinds.
Yep.
And similarly, I've learnt that what you pay attention to, your mind becomes. It's basically a metaphysical principle. It's the way meditation works on a particular frequency. You pay attention to a particular frequency, you drop into that data stream or that band of information, that band of reality, and incrementally you become that thing. You're experiencing that thing, right? To whatever degree. So when you look at the way that we're ingesting all of this media around the Epstein files, you go, this is all attention. We're placing all of our mental attention onto something that invariably we are going to become, And whilst I think in every facet it's important for us to know darkness, and we'll get into later on within ourselves, to know the dark corners of our personality, because once you know them, they're no longer dark, they're illuminated. So you want to know about what's taking place, be aware of it, as you mentioned earlier again, and something that maybe you'll touch on. But open the blinds. So when I was asked by our mutual friend Sky, are you going to be touching on any of the Epstein stuff? I wasn't sure how I could offer people darkness and not be contributing to the overall consciousness of whoever's watching lowering.
Yeah.
Because that's no good. And I still don't necessarily know how we go about that, other than what you mentioned before around the difference between you coming back and being like, this is happening, da, 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 and you're not scared, but you're scaring the shit out of whoever you're speaking to, versus you starting the Living Free movement and essentially opening the blinds and offering some form of solution out of that particular way of thinking, not just going, here's the darkness, that's all there is, because that's what we become when we pay attention to this stuff. And it was funny as I was talking earlier and trying to describe what, you asked me a question, like, give us a bit of breakdown on your story. And I'm jumping around here, there, and everywhere. I'm still a little bit fried from everything that has been coming in regarding the Epstein stuff. I'm still finding that I had a week there where, regardless of my history of meditation and being on that pursuit of light, man, the rhythmic swing into the dark place was crazy. I was so depressed for like a week, and it was following, it was pretty much, a week or two after all the Epstein stuff started to come out, and I wasn't diving into the files. I wasn't, but just the weight of it was just immense. So, I think in whatever way, shape, or form, if we're going to be sharing what's taking place in that darker way, we need to be considering how we can buffer that and create some sort of exit strategy for people as well. And I think this is important for everybody who is putting out content surrounding this stuff, because it's horrible. And I bet you they seem all fine and dandy when they're doing their bits and pieces, trying to get views and clicks and whatever. But I guarantee they're not fine and dandy afterwards, and they're not harmonious inside themselves. And so really it's like, if we're going to be communicating on this mass level, how do we do it in a way that's not corrosive? And so I don't really have the answer, but I guess maybe we try and find it in what we're discussing here, and because it's a feeling quality, having no fear is great. And I get drawn back to, it's a letting go process. It's just a letting go of what you think because if you're in that dark place, you think that the world's dark.
Yeah.
But the other beautiful aspect that's come out recently in conversations that I've had is the universe is always in motion and finding this homeostasis. So whilst it might feel like the darkness gets louder, if it's not yet as bright as the darkness is dark, the light is on its way out and on its way up. And I've had conversations with the founder of Spinal Energetics, and I also spoke to Edith Ubuntu Chan, who teaches children how to see just with their consciousness, blindfolds on.
Yeah.
And I asked them both, are you finding that as time goes on, people are learning it faster? And they said yes. And what that says to me is that there is a wave effect, this, what my teacher would say, critical mass of a particular level of consciousness that shows me we're driving out of it. Yeah. We are driving out of it. Whether you can see it or not, we're on our way out.
And I guess that's where the personal choice is, right? It's do you want to get stuck with this stuff? Do you want to delve really deep and have that time where it's depressing to sort of look at? It will affect your relationships. It'll affect your time with your family, all of these things. Or do you want to acknowledge that it's there? And it's actually like, I don't even think, and I haven't looked through the files, but from what I know, they're not even at the worst of it. It's worse than what's coming out. You don't need to know that. And even when you start to look at medical stuff and everything, it's usually worse than what you're aware of. So your reality bubble keeps getting popped and you go, okay, it's worse again. It's worse again. And it just sucks this energy. But why don't we just acknowledge that it's bad? And then we go, I don't really need to know how bad or keep that, but it's bad. Now, what are we going to do about it? Well, I don't think we can take it down. I did my best to try to do that. And I got to the idea that trying to change that is massive. It's going to have to come at some massive level, a God level, for this to all come away. Because, and I think I explained this on the phone when we were chatting, is that let's say we go in and we rescue a couple of kids from one of the border houses. Fantastic. Do I have the ability to rehabilitate those kids? No, I don't have the training and ability or whatever to do that. And am I just allowing the space for two other kids to come in because there's a need there and they're going to find two other kids? And have I just doubled the situation by thinking I'm doing the right thing and I haven't been able to even heal these kids? So
it's a confronting reality, isn't it?
It's massive when you start to ask those questions of yourself. Am I making things better or worse? Am I, by sharing this post, and most people will say, by sharing it, I'm making more people aware and I'm doing my part, but are you actually making it better or worse? Is that energetic part shifting onto somebody else and making their life worse? And in reality of what you're sort of saying, that what we focus on, we become. So we're creating a world of this depression and energy sucking into that. But meanwhile, those distractions are preventing us from becoming the creative, amazing beings that we can. And we spoke about these miraculous healings and the, Edith with the kids and all of these sorts of things. If we tune into that stuff, the light stuff, the amazing world that we can just sit there and wonder and not even fully understand how it works, what does our world look like? And is it the solution to all of the darkness? Maybe all of that dies out the more that we can be there, or maybe it's going to continue to be there and we can't change it. Maybe that's our reality that we're in. I don't know. What's your thoughts?
Well, something sprang to mind then. It's something that I offer to people in meditation classes and whatever else that I'm doing with people in that particular space. And it's the awareness around what is actually positive and what is actually negative within our experience, and how do we recognize that for ourselves? Because sometimes something can feel really good but have a negative impact on us.
What's an example?
So the Epstein files, for example.
Yeah.
We know it's bad, but we keep going back to it, right? And so there is a feeling of satisfaction that comes out of, I now know this thing.
Yeah.
I now have awareness around this. I am forewarned, therefore I'm forearmed. But when you look at what your spirit is actually doing in those moments, it really comes down to how, I guess what I'm saying is, the way in which we can perceive what is actually positive for us and what is actually negative for us is, does our mind close down or does it expand? And not expand into new information. Is our consciousness and our awareness in this moment now expansive, relaxed, released out, or is it contracted down on this one thing? And is the good feeling, or is that addictive feeling, that, oh, I'm getting somewhere feeling, actually good? Well, where does it sit on that expansion and contraction scale? It's super tight. It's super tight. And when we're letting go of our beliefs and our subjective views in order to spiritually evolve, it's always this. It's this letting go process. It's dropping this contracted state that is required in order to know new things, you know? And so heightened emotions, very, very addictive. And it can feel like it's going in the right direction, but really when you look at it, I wouldn't say it's a net negative, but if your goal is, and a lot of people within the freedom movement, the spiritual movement, is advancement, a spiritual evolution, personal growth. Personal growth can only be that. It can only be getting further and further out, allowing more and more of what's there to be present in this moment, not this subjective personal, I am this, I am that, I know this, I know that, you know? And it's an annoying thing to hear, because quite often we're hearing it from the personified view, you know? But the thing that I've taken away, and that I still, you know, as I said, I'm a little fried from the past few weeks because I'm clamping down. But it's the awareness of the clamp that needs to be fostered in all of us.
Yeah.
It's just that mechanic, really. And going down these paths, like I mentioned to you that I went down all at the different jurisdictional law side of things, and that was so stimulating. I was like, oh my God, yeah, oh, gobble, 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 like eating it all up, right?
Yeah.
And I felt like this is a good thing for me, for my family, for our awareness of my rights as a person, or this and that. But then I end up completely fried, and I end up on the other end of the fry going, oh, okay. I was consumed by something, and I was blinded by this feeling quality, which isn't release. It's not release. It's contraction every time. And I've just found that life's a dance of that up until this point. Up to this point, that seems to be the most pertinent aspect of spiritual and personal evolution, you know? And I think somewhere in there, if we're aware of that, when we're posting to social media, are we adhering to our awareness of that scale?
Yeah.
You know, are we offering people this, or are we offering people this?
Yeah. And the problem is, a lot of people are wanting this.
Because you can't grip down on this.
Yeah.
You can't bite down on this.
Yeah.
And if we're constantly reinforcing this idea of who I am, this is never going to be enticing, or at least not for a long time. That going me is the thing that we're used to doing, and familiarity is addictive. It's comfortable. It's the whole thing of like, you know, you'll take what you know, even if what you know is bad for you. You know, like women, like the thing that pops up, springs to mind is people who women in particular, being in these abusive relationships over and over and over again, or finding these patterns over and over and over again. They're looking at their life and their personal view as ultimate reality, and perpetuating this particular belief and pattern, and they end up back in these places that are no good for them. But it's better the devil you know than the one you don't. Not that you necessarily think that consciously, but if you look at it objectively, well, that's what it is, unfortunately.
I mean, I've with Living Free, obviously we've got, you know, podcasts. We've got the festival was really important to come together in person. That was something that we couldn't get, you know, online. But part of the journey, and I've noticed some of our members, especially of our older members who have been around for a little bit and have had their own evolution of who they are and everything else, are realizing, and this is the thing with all of this, is that they don't need this, what we're doing. They don't need the podcast. They don't need the chats anymore. They don't need the online information, and they're switching off and their world's getting better, and they still come to the festival and they still do these things. But I almost feel like Living Free, and this is something I'm coming to accept more and more, is that it's a transition for you to realize that you are the answer, not anyone else. And if you can get to that point, awesome, we've achieved. And the funny thing is, that point actually means that you're no longer with us, probably, because you're not going to keep paying for a subscription that you don't need or want to be a part of. So, yeah, I think that is actually the solution. I switch off. You know, I don't follow anyone online. And it's to my detriment, because obviously when we're trying to interview people, go, have you spoken to this person? Do you know this person? These people are amazing. And I don't know those people. And I've only just switched social media back on because I got kicked off during all the anti-child trafficking stuff. They shut down my
channel.
channels.
Shut down.
Yeah. So, and I just thought, well, okay, I'm not going to put it back on. They actually put photos. So we had some death threats afterwards when we came back to Australia, and they put photos of my kids up and things like that. And I was just like, I'm not going to have that. So even when we moved house and things like that, we would put the rentals under my wife's name, you know, different surname, those sorts of things, just for protection, so that I wasn't dragging that world into our world and trying to create some level of protection. But, you know, I think that this is the thing, is that the inner journey, which is the part where you actually have to do some work. And that's the other thing, I think, that the reason why people aren't attracted to that is that they don't want to do any work. They just want someone else to do the work for them. The same on the lawful stuff. You can, if you're going to do this and you're going to stand up in court and you're going to say these things, if you haven't done the work, you're going to get smashed. You can't look at someone's cheat notes and deal with whatever the judge is going to say and react in the way that is going to get you a positive result, because you don't know it, because you haven't really been through it. So I think a lot of what we're going through now is, are you ready to take a journey that is going to make your life better, but it's going to take some work? And in that journey, you may be confronted, like what we're being confronted with now, with information that's uncomfortable, to a reality that bursts your world that you're in. But ultimately, I see it as like a childbirth of, like, you know, a child doesn't know the world that they're in. So they completely, you know, inside the womb, and they're sort of going, wow, this is a cool world. And then they're pushed through the birth canal and they've got all this stress and, oh my God, what's going on? And then they come out to this light and this other world. It's hard to convince the baby that you should go through this birth, because it's not a pleasant experience during that time, and you're in a blissful place already of ignorance and everything else. But on that other side, there's something there that's much more magnificent. So for me, it's putting out that challenge to people. Are you ready for that? And you can come through that journey in a million different ways. But there is an inner work that happens when you do it, whether it's to learn the lawful stuff or to buy some land and grow your own garden and to do this, or maybe it is to go deep into the Epstein stuff and come out through the other side. The idea is to not get stuck, to not stay in that place of online negativity, creating the very thing that they want us to create, which is to remove the energy from the amazing people in the world, so that you never get to that creative place, that next part. You're just going to stay in this arguing about, Palestine and Israel, and arguing about this war and whatever other distraction they've got for us. If we're fighting each other at that level, we're never understanding that the people above who are pulling the strings are actually the people that, are doing all of that on purpose to keep us away from who we're meant to be. And so if we ignore that somewhat, acknowledge that it's evil and it's bad, but move away from it and focus internally on ourselves, our family, all the enriched stuff, we can get to this other place. And I think that that's really the message during all of this, that we need to make sure that we're balancing that information and not feeding the very thing that they want us to do.
Yeah, and also on exactly that, we can look at things from different vantage points. So you can look at any of this information, anything that comes your way, with an open mind and a recognition early on that this isn't going to be the be all and end all of the story. Because I think where we start to implode a little bit is when we stop moving, as you said, we go clip, oh no, this is it. Or at least some part of us believes that this is it. But if we look at everything as like, I don't know, maybe, yeah, okay, maybe, but not the whole answer. I don't have to bite down. I don't have to, chew on this for weeks at a time, because there's always more to the story. And it's not only that there's more negative to the story, but there is going to be positive to the story too. It's like, how do we widen the lens on everything that we see? And I think it's useful for this type of information, but it's also useful for our own personal development and looking at the way that we think, the way that we feel, and then what we subsequently do as a result of that causation chain, because that comes to light when we're looking at this information as well. We're confronted people that don't want to hear it don't, in my opinion, from what I've seen, don't want to hear it because it completely challenges what they think they already know. And they may think that that's a better reality, but it's still locked down and closed down to possibility. Because I think the flip side of the thing that I love about the quote unquote conspiracy side of things is it's such a great exercise in possibility and going, what, or maybe, why would I ever say no? That's not possible. Why, if any part of me is shutting down and saying, not the case, quickly ask yourself how you know that, right? How do you know that? How do you know that that's not true? How do you know that that is true? It's always this dance. I think
you had Steve Young on, right? And he talks about, some of these theories that everything's based on, like, whether it be the virus theory to, the planetary system or to, all of these things. And I had this conversation he was an Israeli guy when I was over in Brazil, and he was talking about something and he just went, well, that's the case. And I said, so how do you know that? And he goes, well, it's fact. It's just fact.
Mm.
And I was like, yeah, but what if the scientists might have lied about that thing? Do you think that would change that?
Mm.
Like, no. He was like fully. And my mate was there and he was sort of laughing because he knew my perspective on this stuff. And I was like, yeah, but what if that whole theory is based, like, and we make these assumptions based on, or Mike Wilkerson talks about it, like, well, that's carbon dating. It's been carbon dated to this point. But what if there's rapid petrification that changes all of those timelines? That means that this story might not be true. And, I think that that's the interesting part, is that what facts or what are we building our facts upon, these other facts and these other facts. And you go deeper and you go, well, maybe that's not true. And so that's really part of this evolution of learning and unlearning, and then trying to rediscover but letting go at the same time. And it's like this dance of like...
There's a reason that we're in a chaotic state right now. Like this is all part of it.
Yep.
This is all part of it,
But
like,
how cool is it at the same time?
So stimulating.
Yeah. It's like, it's, especially, and I laugh because I was involved with elite sport for so long. And I play in this hockey team, and they're all work for government, and they're all in their jobs, and you have these conversations with them and these guys in the team, and it's basically like, well, what's the footy score? Have you seen the footy score?
Oh man!
And it's like these conversations that's such on this low level part, and I'm sitting there going, I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care. It's just a distraction. It's the Roman circus. But I have to play along somewhat because I don't want to be that guy all the time. And then you have a conversation like we're having now, like a stimulating conversation. And it's like I can feel the energy come up. And I guess that's what, the reason that we created the festival as well, is just to be around other people with that energy of like these what if conversations and these bizarre things. And wow, I didn't think about that. At the moment, I'm doing this other podcast we've just started. We'll release it soon, but it's, I've gone on this spiritual journey because I saw I was like an atheist. I was against everything. And when I saw all the evil and what they were doing and everything, I was like, there must be the other side. So I've gone on this spiritual journey, and then I thought I sort of had it worked out. And I sort of like, okay, yep, cool. I feel comfortable with this understanding of the spiritual world, not going into the religious side, but into that. And then we've done this podcast, and then he's like, yeah, but the translation for this is this, and these ancient texts actually show this, and the story on these other places is actually the same story here if you look at this. And I'm sitting there going, oh, and it's just burst my reality again. So I'm recalibrating again this information each week that I do this podcast with him.
Who's this with?
His name's Stephen Collibert. And yeah, so I'm basically we do it every second week. We'll start releasing them soon, but I'm just blown away by this information and then the possibilities of it. And it's like, he's talking about the Old Testament. Well, what if this word is actually this translation? And what if that changes everything? Like, and for him, he went through this similar journey, and it was the idea. So in basic, I'll tell you one of the podcasts, but he basically challenges the idea that the Old Testament is actually these Elohim stories, and Elohim is gods. So it actually means gods.
Is he saying it is or isn't Elohim?
It is.
Okay, yeah.
He's saying, well, the translation is Elohim, and they changed it to Lord, and they changed it to this. But there's stories there that never made sense to him, and it was things like, God enjoys the smell of burning flesh. Now, people would never, say that was in the Bible, but you look it up and it does, and it's like, hang on. Is that the God that, why is he like burning flesh?
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, okay, if it's Elohim and it's another God, and it's maybe these gods that these people are sacrificing to, maybe that story is about this God, not the creator, the overall creator. It's like, okay, so you start to recalibrate some of these biblical stories that we've, held onto and go, maybe that's the case. I don't know. But I like having the conversation of at least challenging the thought and continuing to challenge our thoughts.
Mike Wilkerson actually said, when people are confronted with, his particular pursuit is by regular standards so out there,
Yeah.
right? Titanology and biogeology, so out there. Like when I was describing to people, like when I was talking to this guy about, I was like, giant trees. We'll stay with giant trees for now, because it's just too much. But he brought a really good point up. He said, when people hear it, they go, why would that be the case? Why would they lie? And he's like, but you have to start with if, and then how, and then why.
Yeah.
Go through it that way, so not to be thrown off the scent immediately. You know, why are you throwing away if and how first?
Well, we did a series called But What If? And it was to basically say, but what if giants roamed the earth? But what if the world was flat? But what if it was whatever? And it was so like, can we just have the conversation? Not shut down. Let's have it. Let's hear it. And then just go, but what if? If that was the case, why would they then lie? And what effect would that have on the world now and your reality of what you believe is true? Would that have changed it?
I find it so interesting that people, as a knee-jerk reaction, want to shut it down. You're like, what's the threat? What is the threat that you, and I generally find that with people, the threat is this idea of being kicked out of tribe.
Yeah.
Is being kicked out of society. Like when I was going through all the COVID stuff, my wife was really struggling and she was like, are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? Sort of thing. And I was like, yeah, I think I am, but this feels to be the right direction. I said, where is all the resistance coming from? And she's like, it's just going to be in the media, and then people are going to say this about us. And I realized that it was all this need to belong to something, that tries to, it has this natural way of containing us and moderating our even our thoughts and the possibilities. But I go, the tribe actually doesn't. We're not out in the jungle anymore, and if we're kicked out, there's no tiger to eat us.
Yeah.
So there's no real threat. People might say, who gives a fuck?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Who cares? Like, yeah, it hurts somewhat, but it's like a biological imperative almost that's there constantly. It's like, I don't want to be moderated by that anymore. So what if the earth is flat? How am I supposed to know otherwise? You're telling me because they're saying that this is happening on the TV, it's such a tangled web, and you just go, just shut up for a moment and consider the possibility.
Yeah. But what if? Like.
That's much nicer than shut up. And
But I had the same thing with my wife when we vaccinated our first child, the first couple of vaccines, and then I was questioning the vaccine thing. And I'm having these conversations with my wife. She wasn't quite there at that stage. I was like, look, read this, watch this. I've got these concerns. I'm still doing my research. And even when I started to research, I was like, I hope this isn't true because I don't want to be one of these anti-vaxxers.
Yep.
I don't want to be in that. And then, she sort of went through the same thing. So I was like, she's like, well, what about childcare? What about this? What about this? Not what about like the safety of our kids? It was like also like, how do we deal with this? And obviously the safety is number one, but how do we deal with this situation of this? So I just made her the promise. I said, I promise you we'll work it out. I don't know how, but I promise you it'll be okay. And we've been together for 23 years or something. And she goes, okay, I trust you. And we worked it out. It was okay. But I do think that there is a fear of, what happens to that tribe if you do believe this. And, I thought for ages that the flat earth thing was a narrative to discredit all the other conspiracies. So I didn't want to look at it. And I was like, I'm not going to look at that. I'm not going to even pretend, because what if there's some credibility to it. I don't want to be one of those crazies. And, you know, people go, you're not one of those flat earthers, are you? And I'm like, no, but maybe. And I'm sitting there, you know, so I think that is the interesting part about this as well, is you've got to be ready to challenge that. You don't have to tell everyone like what we're doing on a podcast that we've gone through these crazy thoughts, but are you willing to challenge some of these preconceived facts that we've been told? And the facts start at such a young age at school, you know, like this is one of the first things they actually do is the solar system. You know, in prep, they're doing the solar system.
Right, okay.
So it's like your whole knowledge is based on this is how the world on the spinning globe does this and does that. And we accept it because it was taught to us at prep. Mm-hmm. And then we build these knowledge, or this is how the cells work. This is, you know, biology. You know, this is how, and so we're building these foundational knowledges at school, which we know has been manipulated as well by these other groups. Who pays for it? And then the good stuff, like what we're talking about with the chiropractic, there's two realms of thought, like Simon and those guys that they're teaching are focused on vitality chiropractic. It's like bringing the vitality back. There's another school which is just about cracking, and they've taken out the healing aspect of what that is. So there's two parts. So, you know, there's this duality where people go, well, and I think this is the same with most things, is everyone wants to go, you know, that there's only two possibilities. So the world's flat or the world's round.
Red or blue.
Chiropractic is bad or it's good, you know, but it can be both. You know, red or blue, Israel or Palestine, this or that, you know, and, you know, is the government good or bad? Both. You know, we have good aspects and bad aspects of all of this. You know, is the war in Iran at the moment good or bad? Well, for some people it's good, for some people it's really bad. You know, it's okay to be both, and it's okay to say that and not pick a team or be forced to pick a team of red or blue. And that's, you know, to not know whether the world's flat or round. Maybe it's oblong. Maybe it's a different shape. I don't know. And I'm not going to know. And maybe one day I will, when I leave this bodysuit, I'll get all the answers and I'll go, sweet, that's cool. That's even better than what I was thinking. You know, so I think we have to accept that there is a push for us to pick a side there, because what it does is it creates division between everyone, and everyone fights against each other and they never get to that next level. And that's where they want us. But why do they want us at that? Maybe, just maybe, but what if? But what if we are more powerful than we can ever conceive? And maybe all of these ideas of what we can do, you know, there's books that talk about levitation. There's books that talk about, you know, astral projection and, you know, all of this sort of stuff. Maybe we can access, like Edith, these abilities to be aware. You know, they do like card games and everything blindfolded. What are our possibilities if we can shut off this noise and these distractions and this duality of fighting each other? What does that world look like? And what does it look like for our kids? I know it's a much more positive, amazing world than what I came back from the child trafficking thinking that the world's going to be. And that excites me for my kids to explain this stuff. And they come back from school and they'll tell me what they went. And I go, but what if that's not true? And, you know, like, maybe it's this. And my kids are like, love it. We have these amazing conversations. And I go, just be aware that that might not be true. Let's, you know, learn it. Accept that there might be some truth to it, but also accept that maybe that's not how the world works.
Yeah, I've been considering the same thing because I've got a 1-year-old daughter, and I was like, how am I, if she does go to regular school, because we've been considering the homeschool option. Right now it doesn't seem feasible because we're in the midst of, you know, sleep deprivation and, you know, not understanding how those sorts of systems work in a good way, because they too, like chiropractic, have got this like woo-woo hippie BS sort of stereotype around it. But if she does end up going to public school, how do I mitigate the propaganda and the indoctrination, the incentive to be just good at memorizing what you're told? How do you mitigate that? Because they're there 6 hours. How long have I got her for?
Yeah.
Start and finish of the day.
So we're navigating that constantly with our kids. In fact, this year we're talking about bringing them all out to homeschool because, there was a bit too much going on. And then we've created some solutions and then we feel comfortable. And I work closely with the school on some of the stuff. I go, there's certain lessons that I go, they're not to be in that lesson. One's around the sort of, they call it but it's basically this old safe schools program. And it goes into gender ideology stuff and everything. I'm like, they don't need that. I'm a parent. I can teach my kids about that stuff. That's not a school thing. Can you focus on the maths and the English and that sort of stuff? And I'll focus on the other stuff. And they go to a small Catholic school where I've got a lot more sort of interaction with them and I can monitor that. And we also then do our stuff at home and we'll also take them out of school. So, if I'm not going to force them to go every day, like let's go out to the beach, lovely day.
So good.
Do that. They're going to get more value from that. So it's understanding that school has a place. But my daughter, we thought we're going to go to, she's going to homeschool from high school on. So she's in her last year of primary school. And then she goes, Dad, I really want to go to this high school. And it's this alternative school and it's got this and all the rest of it. I looked it up and I was like, that's pretty good. We went on a tour the other day and they've got some programs, like some amazing programs. They've got like a full reptile program, snakes, all of this. They've got farm animals there. They've got amazing art programs, music programs, all this stuff that's enriching that I can't provide at home. I could provide some of this stuff, but I can't provide that enriched environment. And yet there's going to be some elements there that I can see that they've probably onto the gender stuff and all the rest of it. But my kids are mature enough to navigate through that. So I don't think you're ever going to find something that's perfect. But can you influence enough to make sure that they don't go down that? Can you pull them out enough that you're able to do that where you're not just handing over the responsibility? I think if you are taking active charge of that, you can still use the system in a way that allows your kids to get the most enriched experience.
Sure.
And also learn at the same time without completely sheltering them that the world is this other place as well. Can you allow them to navigate? Because they're going to get to a stage where they also have to navigate. They're going to go out to the world and they're going to face this stuff. So we can't just hide them away and homeschool and pretend this other stuff doesn't exist. So they're still going to have somewhat of an interaction. So at the moment, we feel comfortable with that. But at any stage, we're willing to pull them out or find a different environment if we felt like that's the case. And the funny thing is some people in the freedom, spiritual space, whatever, will judge that as well. You should be homeschooling. But once again, it's not a one thing or another. You can be aware, you can put things in place, you can do that. I've had conversations with the principal, I've gone through and gone, okay, we're not doing this curriculum. And they go, oh, well, here's the curriculum here. We've got this. I'm like, I've already read it. I'm aware of it. Are you aware that this is the person who wrote it? And this is what, and they're like, oh my God, I didn't know that. So you can actually interact and, some of the teachers, when I've explained some of these things, they're like, I 100% agree with what you're doing. I have to teach it because this is the funding that we get and all the rest of it. So I think you can do both. I think you can straddle both worlds, the same as the idea of public and private. People are like, you've got to hand in your license, you've got to do this, this extreme part. I'm not doing that. I want to be able to drive down the road and not be harassed by the police and do all the amazing other things that I do. It doesn't mean I agree with everything But I think you need 1 foot in, 1 foot out to straddle both worlds a little bit, at least at this time in the world, and get that balance between reality of like, because I know people that have handed everything in, they've made their life terrible, or they've trying to fight every single fine that they ever get. And they go to court 7 times to try to fight a fine that was $110.
Oh, it's madness.
If that is part of your learning environment, fantastic.
Yeah.
Free education, go do it. I've got other things that I want to create. So if I get to the stage where I can't write a couple of basic letters to get rid of it, I'll pay the fine because I don't want them to energetically win by taking me away from my purpose. And I think that that's where everyone's got to ask themselves, what is your purpose? And does the distraction of this journey take you away from that greater purpose? And if it does, maybe reevaluate.
Yeah, it's looking at it, all currencies as not just financial currency, but like how much energy are you spending? You're still spending something, you know? Do you want to spend months of your life fighting $110 fine?
Yeah.
You know, it's madness. I've done it a couple of times as a learning exercise. Like I actually fought one, didn't fight it. I just underwent this sort of private administrative process sort of thing that I literally learned through ChatGPT.
Yeah.
I had an basic understanding of what the structure of the situation was from the perspective of private and public. And so then I used to sort of prompt the ChatGPT just to get them to write up the specifics, the notes and whatever. And within a few, maybe 4 or 5, maybe 6 interactions, they had retracted my $1,836 fine or something. And I thought that's big enough to have a bit of a play with it. And it worked. And I went, oh,
Yeah.
great. But I'm certainly not going to do that for every, minuscule little process, or minuscule fine rather.
And there's this other thing that I've experienced multiple times now where things disappear if you're on the right residence.
Oh, yeah.
And I got a fine. I was arrested over COVID for being 5 kilometers out. I attended a protest that was 5 kilometers out of my zone. Got arrested. I don't even know what the fine. It was thousands of dollars to be outside of that. And I went to pay it. It was gone. And it showed up at one point, and then I looked again, and it's gone. And so I've had the same thing occur with other fines. I've had the same thing occur in other parts of my life where sometimes there's this thing, and once again, we come back to this thing of I don't even know how to explain it, but when you put out a certain energy, when you can get to a certain stage, some other things just disappear and they become less relevant and all the rest of it. So I do think that there is something else going on at play that, if we can focus on that stuff, then some of these little things,
the intangibles start to lighten up a little bit or start to present themselves.
Yeah, I mean, like an energy sort of thing. Like I've had it where, I'm waiting on a whole bunch of things in business to come through. Like this person needs to get back to me, this one, and I'm just in there stressed for a day or so. Like I can't do anything more. I'm like, okay, kids, let's go to the beach. Jump in the car. And they all jump in the car. And as I'm about to turn the keys in the car, I get these messages, ding, ding, ding. And all these things are just falling into place. And I don't believe those things would have fallen into place if I didn't jump in the car. I think I would have still been fighting this thing.
Yeah.
And then you get into a bit of more of a flow state where you're like, let's go back to the priorities of family, this or the rest of it. And life can naturally get into a flow part where things are, you're not pushing, like if you're really pushing on stuff to make it happen, it can be 2 things. One, I think energetically it's trying to stop you from that breakthrough. And you're often on this journey, discover that you do have things that come up to try to keep you away from that next part. But if you're really fighting it, sometimes it's also that you're not meant to go that direction. And so you've got to try to weigh up what that is. Am I going in the right direction for the right reasons? Or am I being pulled back, into another direction because I'm meant to go in that other direction? I think we have to realize, and I think the only way to get to that, we have a guy called Jambi. He was at the festival as well. And I've done a couple of podcasts with him, and he talks about being grounded and connected. You know, where like a biblical thing is we just want to be connected to God. And then there's this whole other movement of natural stuff. We want to be grounded. He's like, no, it's both. And when you've got both, you're kind of stable and you can navigate this world and go, should I go left or should I go right? And you can ask the universe, ask God, ask whatever, am I on the right track? And you can get guidance there. But the important thing is to keep asking, am I going the right direction? Is this for the right intent? Am I, you know, going on my true purpose? And the more we do that, the more we seem to be able to navigate in the right way, maybe make a few mistakes.
You know, you got your business gurus like your Alex Hormozis, and you heard of him online? No. Yeah, I realize you don't follow anybody. He's a super successful, relatively young dude, $100 million in sales and whatever, and he's always pushing, you know, his way of doing things. And I look at him and go, yeah, he's very successful. But I look at him and go, why do I not want to do what you're telling me works?
Yeah,
it's because there's this. And then he did an interview with Tony Robbins, and Tony Robbins went, brother, you're doing great, except you're trying to willfully push and like will everything into existence, burning the candle at both ends. Where he goes, whereas if you've got this almost vocational, a purpose that is going to magnetically pull you forward and allow you to move and unfold before you, he goes, that's the balance you need to find, because you're not satisfied with $100 billion in sales. And I quite often find, to your point about, you know, you let go, you know, go to the beach and ding, 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 ding. It's like, allow things to unfold. And I struggle with this bad at the moment because my life's always done that. It's always been about unfolding. But now I've got a family. Now I've got, and my wife's very do, and things unfold for her really beautifully. She's got quite a nice balance with it all. But I've always been just jump in the stream, and where it takes you is going to be where you're supposed to go. Supposed to is the wrong word, but you know what I'm saying. And I find that it to be the healthiest, most harmonious way for me to approach a pursuit in something. Yeah, you know, which is why when it came to the acting stuff 8-9 months ago, I went, why am I pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing? Should I just let go? And then I get here today and speaking with your wife, and you know, she's a writer, and she's like, oh, we should, you know, maybe there's something we'll learn. And I go, holy shit. So the thing that I was pushing for, and even if that doesn't go, even if that's not a thing, like there's a doorway that opens up as a result of letting go and getting to where you had imagined yourself going, but just in a way that you hadn't determined was the way.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And so that what's that? I mean, it's removing our controlling side of it, trying to control this world that, you know, and like you come down to these questions, right, of what is this place? Like you know, and there's a lot of evidence to suggest that our spirit continues on and this bodysuit stays here, goes back to the ground, potentially the same ground that, you know, it was made from if you go on the biblical story. So this thing that is consistent is this spirit that's inside of us. And so then what is this spirit going into? Like, has it gone into other bodies, like reincarnation? Does it come back? Does it go to another place, another dimension? You know, what's our purpose? Are we here to learn? And therefore, you know, I've always had the idea, and I'll bring it back to the trafficking stuff for a second, because this was a concept that I struggled with for a little while, was that we're in a consent-based realm. And you had it with the vaccine. It was made out as though it wasn't consent, but you had consent. Mm-hmm. The reality for you was that, you know, you had to change your career and do all of these things. So it didn't feel like consent because you were kind of being forced. or at least coerced. But in the end, you had consent. And so then if the world is based on consent, which there seems to be some level of agreement between these entities, because if there's this evil, why can it not just cross over the line and just be completely evil and blow up everything and all of us? Why did they need our consent to jab when they could have used the army to hold us down and do that? So there does seem to be these rules in this place that we're in that requires consent. And then you say, well, okay, what about these kids that have been hurt? Going back to these awful things that we've had, where was the consent? Well, they weren't able to give consent. But what if the consent was not given here? So what if the consent was, and we don't know fully what it is, but let's say we were sat down and they said, well, you're going to go back to Earth and you're going to have an experience. Do you really want to learn, develop yourself, your spirit more? And do you want it to be a fast journey or a slow journey? Do you want to learn over a long period? No, just send me back. I just want a quick journey where I want to upgrade and just give me the worst of it. And then I'll be back here and I would have developed my spirit. Then maybe you've selected the awful thing that's occurred. Maybe there was consent at that spiritual level of that experience. And then maybe, we went, no, just give us the less full-on version, and we're coming here to learn, and maybe we don't evolve as much as some of these people that have gone through it. So I do think it's interesting as to, if it is a consent-based realm, what is it and what's our purpose here? What's the greater purpose of having this experience? Because it can't all be for nothing. And, are we here? Why are we important to these other beings in some capacity, where they need to feed off us and do these things and whatever it is? Where do we come into that? Because clearly there's a value there, that a perceived value from them to sacrifice or to do these things where they gain energy or they gain whatever. There's a creative aspect that they don't seem to be able to access. And there seems to be an ability for us to gain knowledge from these things. If you look into the satanic stuff or NASA and these things where they've gone into that, there seems to be an exchange of doing bad things and gaining advanced knowledge, advanced technologies, these sorts of things. I find it fascinating. Once again, I don't know the answers.
Yeah, see, I always want to, when I think about kids, I've always loved kids, loved babies. I've got a whole slew of younger siblings going right back to, I think one of them's a year and a half old, right? So they've always been there. So I feel really passionate about protecting children.
Yep.
And I've not actively been in any of these, pedophile hunting groups or anything like that.
Yeah.
But when I see all of this stuff online, it fires something up in me and I go, oh, how about we just change the rules to, if you're found to harm a child, you just get shot in the chest.
Yep.
It's really simple. But then I look at that, and to your point about, is there this soul contract? Is there this understanding beyond this physical realm of the nature of balance and karma? And is the best thing for us to do, again, not engage necessarily in, going out and hunting down pedophiles, which, geez, I fucking really want to do. But do we allow what's taking place on this planet? Because you're not going to stop that whole thing. It sounds really, I have a hard time even saying it, but from that vantage point, you go, well, everything else is supposed to be, just let it be.
Yeah.
Be here. Witness reality. I think the beautiful thing though is there's such an enormous spectrum to karma. It's said to be at those higher levels completely unknowable. You can't track it. It doesn't make any sense to the logical mind.
But then at what point?
But then, sorry, just to finish that point, is that, like I was having this conversation with a friend of mine about this whole thing, and I said, there's a lot of, people who will share that perspective that I just gave and go, no, non-violence is the way, right? And I go, yeah, but violence is an aspect of reality also. And I said, and they always go, well, everything's going to be okay. Look, Project Looking Glass, we've already won and all this sort of stuff. And I said, do you know why we've already won? Because not everybody shares that perspective, right? So you do have people who are going to act in accordance with their soul contract, whether they're aware of that layer or not, So you kind of go, what is my part to play in this? And if you don't feel like your part is this righteous retribution going down and slaughtering people, then maybe don't do that, because there's going to be people doing it. You know what I mean? It's trusting that there is an order to everything, and that the dark may have its rise, but it's going to have its fall. Same with the light. And then in between all of that, there's this balance that's taking place anyway. So it's like, is our perspective of life, again, getting back to our subjective perspective, can we even trust that?
I don't think we can. And I'll give a couple of examples. So we've had a guy on called Ole Demigard, and he's like the conspiracy guru, right? He goes into all this stuff. And he's interviewed a guy called James Files. James was an assassin for the CIA. He worked with the mob and everything, and he took the final shot. He was the guy on the grassy knoll for JFK. So he was the assassin, and he's come out and he's explained all of this. He was put in jail for a period of time, and he's killed over 1,000 people is what he claims. He's still alive, but he's sort of on his last legs, this guy. Super interesting story. If you ever go into it, he gives details of the gun, the bullet, what happened, who was behind the operations, et cetera, et cetera. And he explains that when he's in prison, like, he's obviously a bad guy. He's killed 1,000 people, including JFK, which he didn't care about. He said it was just like taking out the rubbish was his expression. And he said he had an experience where Jesus came and sat next to him in prison. And he said, Jesus said to me, I need to share my story. I need to tell the truth. And that's when he got out of prison. He started doing it. I think he's written a book, and he's got more information he's going to release on his death of all the other ones, including Marilyn Monroe and these sorts of ones. Anyway, what I find interesting is breaking that story down is Jesus didn't come and say to him, you've got all these assassination skills that you've learned over this time. Go and kill all the evil people, right? Why did he just say you got to tell your story? You got to share that. And I sit there and go, how come we don't have a bunch of assassins that are just taking out these evil people? Like, I thought about it when I was going through my stuff. I was like, if I had the skills, maybe I should learn how to, do this stuff and take out these evil people. But it seems like the answer is not that. And I had to think
counterintuitively.
And I had to think about, okay, so especially when you're talking about the things that generationally are occurring, where there's abuse, at one point they're a victim, as a child and everything, and then at one point they become a perpetrator. Mm-hmm. When is that crossing over? And are you in a position to judge it? Are you able to know everything that they've occurred and the mind control stuff and whatever else occurred to them, to the point of them crossing over to a perpetrator where we go, they've done the most evil things? Do you have all the information? I think there's only one person when, or whoever you believe at the top, like, you would have to see the whole thing to even be able to judge that. And Fiona Barnett told me this story. So her perpetrator, or her main person, was Nicole Kidman's dad, Anthony Kidman. Anthony Kidman was the head of the university and in control of the MK Ultra program in Australia. So he was the main perpetrator. She has told me the most horrific things that he did. And it was, to me, it's like, take him out, kill him, all the rest of it. So she was doing a hypnosis session It was her and her husband and the hypnotherapist. And she went into this state where she said the room was lined by these chairs, these high-backed chairs, and these people sitting in the chairs that were sort of kings but not kings or whatever. And it sounds like the courts of heaven type stuff. But she explained it, and she said, I was speaking a language, they were speaking a language, I didn't understand what was being said, but we were communicating. Like, I don't know what the language was, but we're communicating. And I gave testimony of these awful things that Anthony Kidman had done to me. And then there was debate and discussion as to what should happen with him. And I always sat there and went, why was there debate? Like, clearly he's evil, but there was debate on whether this soul could be saved or whatever. Anyway, she came out, gave the testimony, said, he's dead, they've decided. And at that very time, in this reality, he died. He was thrown downstairs or off a building or whatever. The story changed a little bit as to what happened to him. But she reported it to her husband and the hypnotherapist and all the rest of it. That's happened, and sure enough, it comes up in the paper that at that time. So there was some sort of discussion, but I always think about, why was there a debate between these beings, whatever it was? And it just goes to show that we don't have all the information to be judging. And this is what I find that one of the biggest mistakes that humans like to do is judge everybody. Like, you're this or you're this, that binary thing, you're good or you're bad, you're whatever, that was a bad situation. Sometimes there's both. Sometimes you can, in a marriage, you could have been an asshole and amazing. Sometimes you could have been, a fantastic dad and a prick. Like, it's not this idea that it's one or the other, and what's all the experiences. And, going through fatherhood, you'll start to, question some of these things, but there's things that can come down generationally. Like if your dad and my dad was heavy-handed, and, and I got to have this journey, this meditation journey where I got to see the generational stuff that came down. And I got to meet my dad's dad, which I'd never met before in this reality. And he was quite embarrassed and everything else, and had this conversation with him and said, look, no, I'm here to fix the generational trauma. I got to speak to my dad in this sort of spiritual realm, and so I'm here to deal with this. And I got to see where his trauma had started, my grandfather, and that he had this anger built up. He had a stroke when he was quite young, wasn't able to work. Everyone judged him, all the rest of it. And he took it out heavy-handed on his wife and his kids. And I got to see that in my reality with my dad. He was quite, heavy-handed at times and abusive. And I can remember one time he came at me, and I was a teenager, and his eyes just flickered. And I can always remember it was like something went on where it was like, he sort of cracked, and I thought that I'd sort of pushed him because I said, don't ever touch me again. And then I've seen it in my, with my kids, that there's times in which I've had this like thing where I'm just not, 100% in control, where it's like this, and it's been, these instances where it's like this anger's just come out, and for whatever reason. And so I got to address this generational stuff, and realize what has been passed on. And I sat down with my kids when I had this experience, and I said, look, if you've ever felt this way, if you've ever had this experience, I'm sorry. And, and I'm not an abusive father or anything. I just want to put that out there. But it's like
not a weekly discussion you're having with them.
No. But this anger, like you could feel it, where there was a time where I wasn't in total control.
Yeah.
In that. But what I find interesting is what's passed on generationally, sometimes we're not even aware of. And there's things that we can deal with. And I think this is part of the journey. It's also part of the inheritance that we can pass on to our kids, is dealing with our shit, dealing with like these darker things that, might have been passed down, or, a thing that's just the way that things were done in your household growing up, or whatever it might be. And so as part of this journey, this uncomfortable birthing experience, I think it's dealing with our own shit. And, rather than focusing on the Epstein files and these people are evil and everything, what's inside you that you need to deal with that's also going to generationally pass on to your kids in either a positive or a negative way? Are you prepared to do that work to deal with your shit to make sure it doesn't pass on? Or are you going to just be one that passes it on? Like, what's your inheritance? Not financial. What's the spiritual inheritance that you're giving to your kids? What's the knowledge that you're imparting on in that inheritance? I think that they're the bigger things. They're the things that are value. They're the deeper stuff that we have to be willing to go to and ask ourselves these questions. And is there a me that could ever have done any of these evil things? If I was abused, if I went through these things, is there a version of me that could have done the most despicable things? I would like to think not, but I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I would, without answering for you, the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Because I had this very specific experience when I went through acting school. I was telling you that 24 contact hours a week of just basically ripping your chest open and bearing your soul to the rest of your classmates and finding out what's there. And the teachers are assisting and all of, in you unpacking your own baggage. And what I found was that every aspect of myself that I uncovered, I could be more textured and more nuanced within my work, and there'd be something more to draw from. But then after a while, using these, bringing them to the surface, facing them, they no longer had the charge that they once had. And so therefore, I've disrupted a pattern, right? I've taken the energy out of a pattern that maybe was handed to me, that maybe was passed down to me. And what I realized was that no matter what is there, it's not the boogeyman that you think that it is. And people will do the craziest things to avoid looking in this dark corner because they don't realize as soon as they look in the corner, it's no longer dark.
Yeah.
That it is just what it is, and that the charge and the emotion of it all and the perceived reality of it all and what that means, who I am relative to the world around me, that perspective completely starts to defabricate, and you have a type of freedom. So looking at your stuff is, to me, has been pretty much the through line of my life, has been the number one most important thing and most valuable thing that I found. And I saw someone talk about this yesterday online. They were saying that they've gone off and done all these studies and all this meditation, all this and this. And their teacher had said that the number one marker or evaluator of somebody's spiritual growth is their character. How much of your stuff is still lying dormant and is allowed to come out in an unconscious moment? How much unconscious material is there at any given moment? How much does it drive what you think, what you feel, and what you do? And those are the doorways in. What are you thinking? A lot of people. I met a guy recently didn't know what a feeling was. I was like, holy shit! Like, that's okay. So we don't know what a feeling is. What are you thinking? I don't know. Okay, well, in that, I don't know. You're thinking, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Let's break those doorways open. What do I feel compelled to do? Right? What's the feeling quality behind that compulsion? Are there any thoughts associated with that feeling quality that's come up that makes you want to do this thing? So when I was auditioning to play an SS youth soldier, and so there was a lot of material within that script that I didn't understand. I'm like, how? I didn't fundamentally understand the essence of the character because I didn't understand how it was that they could be propagandized. Is that a word?
Yep.
Into dobbing their parents in for being Jew sympathizers or whatever.
Yeah.
And so as I dove into it and I started to look at the way that they presented Hitler, the thing that became obvious was that me as a young man, what I would have done for my father's approval, if he had told me this is valuable, this is what we do, you're part of this group, you're part of this family, this is what we do, I could have committed any number of atrocities if that was the way that I was programmed. And Hitler wasn't, by the conventional understanding of the history, he wasn't just like a father figure. He was like God plus a father. Like if you do this, the Führer will see, he'll love you, this, that. And I came to fully accept by the end of my study into who this character was that I would have been potentially shooting pregnant women in the back of the head.
Yeah.
In a field.
Yeah.
The version of me that if I was transplanted back into that time, this body, this character, the same family, but just with different inputs, you could do anything. And that's a really confronting thing for people to recognize. But when you do recognize it and you take yourself through those what ifs, there's a lot of freedom in it. It doesn't mean you go, oh, okay, sweet, I will just go and do these things. No. There in that freedom, there is a type of higher morality, if that sounds a bit of a dangerous term, but there is a more refined morality that comes out and an understanding of cause and effect.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're saying, your dad and he experienced this from his dad from that dad, It doesn't mean that they are textbook negative beings on this planet. It's just it's pattern disruption. Just look at your shit. Disrupt the patterns. And I've found that even, I had a moment, my daughter's only one, where she was going to do something that I wasn't fully present in that moment, that I didn't want her to do. And I went, hey, and I slapped my hands together.
Yeah.
And I never do that with her.
Yeah.
I do that with my dogs. You know what I mean? Like, hey, psh, like trying to get their attention. No, get over there. And I went, oh my God, yeah, okay. Well, there's something else. And the beautiful thing about experiences like that is that rather than seeing them from the perspective of this means this about me, it's a learning experience, and you get deeper insight into what may still be there, what still controls you, what still holds you in the space that you may be trying to actively navigate your way out of. Does this negative experience, what you've just, like there's this thing with anger. We go, anger's a bad thing. And you go, nah, it is a way to push through a certain barrier at times. Or it's, if you're asking a particular question, why can't I break through this thing that I'm struggling to get past, this hurdle that I'm experiencing, whether it's in my job or in my relationship or my parenting or whatever. Why do I keep getting stuck here? When you ask those sorts of questions, abstract pathways, energetic pathways come out to disrupt something or break something. And you go, oh, that anger actually just broke through this thing potentially.
Yeah.
So and as hard as it is, particularly given the topics that, you and I are discussing around child trafficking, and I hesitate to say it because I saw someone get ripped apart recently saying this thing, but I don't think that there is objective good and bad in the way that our conscious mind or our intellectual mind likes to perceive it.
Yeah.
A friend of mine said to me when I was asking this question to him, I said, how would you define the lines then? And he said, well, it's imposition. Are you trying to control? Are you trying to impose your will on somebody else? Or are you allowing them to be and do and whatever? And that goes in a multitude of directions, but I kind of go, it's a decent enough barometer to start. Maybe that's not the full answer, particularly given where my mind is currently vibrating, but looking at it from that perspective, anything that I see within me, any thought, any feeling, any action, it's all okay. And I had this really poignant experience with a friend of mine who's going through a very, very hard time. And the thing that she reported after a bunch of our sort of chats and sits and whatever else we were doing was that she goes, you really disarmed this idea of what I was thinking was a bad thing. Because I kind of said to her, like, not realizing this was even a point. It was like, she goes, oh, I'm thinking this, I'm thinking that. And I go, oh, yeah, okay. And she took that and she was like, oh. So somebody that I'm here to trust with what I'm saying or my experience, handing over what I have ideas around, goes, okay, so what?
Yeah.
You know? And that really kind of pulls the lens on or pulls, it changes your perspective of what good and bad is, even if it's just for yourself. And I think that's a really a good place to start, you know?
Yeah. I find it with my health stuff is that, one of the big things is people want to go, oh, I'm so sorry. I don't want sympathy. I don't want, that reaction, and so I think we need to understand our interactions with other people and what effect that has and just be there, like, discharging that information for your friend allowed her to just go, okay. And then to not have the judgment based on it. Like, you don't have to agree with it, but you can just hear it. And, the same thing with any of these conversations that we're having, that triggers you, ask, why is it triggering you? Why can you not just hear it? And I always say, like, chew on the meat and spit out the bones. Like, take what's good that's going to help you on your journey and spit out the stuff that's not. You don't have to agree on everything. And, I saw this, and I've seen it quite a bit recently where, in this Freedom Network or whatever, where people are just judging based on, like, you had an interview with this person. There was a guy, what's his name? He was over at Acapulco. Acapulco, is that what it's called? Anyway, the thing over in Mexico, the festival over there.
Okay.
And he's reporting on what happened with the Mexico, cartels coming in and everything else. And then he goes, I'm going to go live with Alex Jones. And I saw it on the post because I was getting updates. Cal, who I work with, he was over there, and some other people I know were over there. And there's all these comments after his thing going, I used to like you, but now you're speaking to Alex Jones. I'm unfollowing you. I'm this, all of this sort of stuff. And it's like, so you can't have a conversation with somebody without taking on everything that they believe. So just by association, like, I don't know that much about you, but let's say you've got some extreme view that I'm not even aware of. But because we had a conversation, that now means that I'm endorsing those views. And it's this idea of, like, trying to just cut people down and put them into this box. And I think we need to have conversations. We need to tackle some of these dark topics in a way that puts light on it, so it disperses that information. The same way when you were talking to my wife about subliminal messaging stuff that can go into these movies. And I go, well, should we not allow our kids to watch these movies? Or should we not watch them? Or let's say an actor that we have fairly strong evidence that maybe they were involved in something bad. Maybe they're on the Epstein list and they've done something. Should I now not watch that movie? No, be aware of it. Don't give that energy to it. You can still enjoy it. And I think that once you're aware of it, it doesn't have the effect. So the subliminal messaging doesn't work if you're aware of it. And
to your point also earlier about things that you're not in resonance with disappear, more than likely you're not going to be engaging in the sorts of media that are going to be spinning your mind. You're not going to be interested. You may not even be aware of the film. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I exactly that. I mean, I just think that where we put our energy, our focus, we can be aware of things on this journey. We can still enjoy trash TV. We can still watch the footy every now and again. We can just don't make it your whole life and that's your only focus. Be aware that there's bigger stuff going on. Continue on that journey and don't get stuck. If you've got, the anger that comes up on you, don't stay in that place, but understand the emotion and let it out. Let that anger out in a safe way. And, allow those emotions to be okay, and also be kind to yourself in that journey. It's okay that anger came through. It's okay that I felt that with my kids when they did that. It's okay. I'm not perfect and we're not meant to be perfect in this, but we are meant to learn from it. So don't get stuck there. Don't continue to make that your story. Learn from that and then move on and try to do better. And all we can keep doing is try to do better, try to learn more, try to keep moving forward. And eventually that creates the world that we want to see.
Yeah.
That's to me, it's like there's no secret answer.
Yeah. And it's funny because, our sort of objective with our chat was to touch on exactly how we could not drag people into the mud whilst also addressing these certain sorts of things. And that also the reason that it's not done very well is because the muddier stuff's easier to grip onto. It's more tangible. As we're getting toward the end of the conversation, I'm like, there's no tangibility, but that is sort of the answer, right? Like,
that's right.
Letting go of all of the things that you're desperately trying to grip onto for some sense of control over your life. It's like, unfortunately, it's just not the bloody answer. Like, I wish it was, because it'd be so much easier.
I do too, and that's my sort of character. Like, generally, I would have liked that, and so accepting that there's not is harder.
Yeah.
But it's also more exciting. It creates a world that doesn't have all the answers.
Potentiality.
And any rabbit hole you go down, you're not going to get to the bottom of it. So just go down a little bit, have a look around if you want, and then hop back out.
Yeah.
Because you going deeper, you're not going to find the bottom of it. You know what I mean? Like, just be aware, have a look, and enjoy this world of what it is. Like, be excited about it. And change that resonance so that is infectious to other people. And that's the ripple effect that we want to put on this world. That's the part where your dad had that experience of like looking back at his life. Like, what's the ripple effect that you're putting out into this world?
Really quickly, I mean, that's an awesome way to wrap it up, but I just want to quickly add this last note. When you were talking about wasn't Rachel, it was Fiona's experience, about the judging panel. My dad also sat in front of that same judging panel.
Yeah.
And he described, I only heard this one recently. I've known about this story for many, many years, obviously. And I only just found out about that particular judging panel where he's there and it's like super bright. You can't even really look at them because they're so, but you can see them all deciding what his fate was going to be.
Yeah. And you get that opportunity.
Amazing?
Yeah. And, I think that's something, right? Like, there's something out there that we can't explain, something spiritual that excites me. There's another level to what's going on. I used to think the world just went black and there was nothing more. I'm excited to whatever the next journey is, wherever this, spirit, soul is going. And what do I learn in this opportunity now that's going to help me on that next journey? That's really what we're here for, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Man, it's great to chat.
Yeah, you really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
so
likewise.
We'll have to do it again sometime. But
Yeah,
thanks
for
so
sure.
much for coming down to Melbourne and jumping in the room and having a chat. And hopefully some of these, conversations can help people on their journey as well.
Yeah, I hope so. Because it's funny. There's a funny irony in having these conversations and diving into the areas that we've dove into, because if you go by what we've spoken about, listening to our conversations and ingesting media and doing this and that, it's actually not even the answer.
I know.
And like you were talking about with the Living Free movement, you go, it's a halfway house for people to let go of everything else and leave us too. You know, it's a hilarious business model.
So if this is your last ever podcast, we've done your job.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, cool.
Exactly. Good stuff.
Thanks, mate.
Awesome. Thank you.